I don't know. I think so. Maybe. Probably. Yes. I've been a fan of Laura Purcell pretty much from the start. I read The Silent Companions when it came out in paperback. From there, I've read everything she's published so far. Laura Purcell is a modern gothic horror historical fiction writer. I've done a video on how much I love gothic historical horror fiction by British women before. It's a blend of genres that I really, really love. I love historical fiction, I love gothic fiction, I love horror, and there's so much right now that kind of blends all these things together, and the best of those books are being written by incredible British women. And as I said in that video, Laura Purcell really leads the charge. It began with The Silent Companions, then The Corset, then Bone China, and now this. So The Shape of Darkness is her new novel. Laura Purcell has brought out almost a book a year, roughly, over the last 5-6 years. It's incredible, the breadth of her imagination. Her novels are always set around the Victorian period in England, and The Shape of Darkness is a great time to talk about her books because she's created this kind of visible trend within her literature. Her first book, The Silent Companions, was a very traditional haunted house gothic horror masterpiece. It was set in a big old house in the English countryside. You had rain and thunder, pathetic fallacy everywhere, and the house was haunted, and the protagonist was a woman with a history, and she's being haunted, and there's a mystery involved, but most apparently it is horror front and center. It is scary. It is terrifying. And then The Corset, her second novel, moved into different territory. It was two protagonists, two women, very, very different young women, one of whom is imprisoned for murder. What she thinks is murder. She believes she has killed several people. And the other protagonist is a woman who is a kind of budding, burgeoning young scientist within a science that was popular in the Victorian period, which turned out to be nonsense. And the two of them have this connection, and we get the imprisoned woman's backstory as she tells it to the young scientist woman. And it's a scary book in places, but it's more of supernatural murder mystery thing. It's gothic, just like The Silent Companions, not horror gothic so much as mystery and suspense gothic, I guess. And then her third novel, Bone China, moved back into Silent Companions territory, set in rural nowhere in England. I think it's set on the Cornish coast. Bone China is an interesting one because it has a lot of the supernatural, scary horror tropes of her first novel, but I don't think it reached those heights. In fact, if I'm going to rank them, I'd put The Corset at the top, followed by The Silent Companions, and then Bone China. Bone China felt like a return to The Silent Companions. It introduced slightly more varied and interesting cast of colourful characters, especially our main protagonist, who moves from London. She has a dark history and she goes to Cornwall. But I actually can't remember a lot of the details of Bone China, whereas her other two books I remember a lot more vividly. But Bone China had a wonderful experience behind it. I felt quite terrified and itchy when I was reading it, so it had an effect on me, and then it felt like it kind of washed from my memory. It was more an experience than a story almost. And now we have The Shape of Darkness, her fourth and newest novel, and I think it's her best novel. I'm going to get this one nitpick out of the way early because it's not actually a criticism of Laura Purcell or her writing, but it kind of bugs me about The Shape of Darkness. I have all of her books in hardback, and every single one of them, I only have The Corset with me, every one of them doesn't have a dust jacket. The hardcover is just this. Everything is printed on the cover itself, and it's absolutely beautiful, all three of them. The Shape of Darkness has a dust jacket, and I just don't like that as much. I think the cover is fantastic and it's very emblematic of the themes and the setting and the story, but I just don't like the fact that it has a dust jacket, because dust jackets get damaged more easily than if it's just a hardcover. This doesn't get used as much in fiction, and I think it should, so I don't like the fact that her publisher left that behind. That's it, that's my nitpick. So what's it about? The Shape of Darkness feels like a return to the Corset style of theme, narrative, storytelling, and character drama. Her first book, Haunted House. Her second book, supernatural-esque character drama. Her third book, Haunted House. Her fourth book, supernatural-esque character drama. This one, The Shape of Darkness, is set in Bath in the 1850s. It's set during December. It's snowing all the way through. Now, I love Bath. It is one of my favourite cities in the UK, in the world. And spending this entire novel in Bath was an absolute pleasure. The fact that it was covered in snow, and I've never seen Bath in the snow, was just so alluring and intoxicating, and it was soothing. It created this soothing atmosphere, which you really need because this book is dark, as the title suggests. But the snow and the setting of Bath just spoke to me so much in a way that historical fiction always does. Also, I'm wearing a Jane Austen t-shirt, and she lived in Bath, I think. The Jane Austen Museum is there, so that's good. Anyway, so it's set in Bath, and it tells the story of two protagonists, two women. One is Agnes. Agnes is a middle-aged woman who creates silhouettes, as the title suggests. It is a traditional art form, and she gets people to sit down, and she creates an outline of their face using a mixture of her hands and a machine. I don't quite understand the art style. I'm not sure how exactly it works, so I'm glad that the cover pretty much spelled it out for me. She does this. And the other protagonist is a 11-year-old girl called Pearl, and Pearl and her sister conduct seances. Pearl believes herself to be a spirit medium. She speaks to ghosts. She and her sister have people come into the house and talk to dead relatives, connect with the dead. When the book begins, we're drip-fed backstory details about both Agnes and Pearl, and as the book goes on, the two of them start to cross over. Every chapter pretty much flits between them, and eventually the two of them meet. And when they meet, there is still a specific focus on one character within that chapter. Every part of this book is written in the third person, and yet Laura Purcell still manages to kind of focus over the shoulder of one of the protagonists. And so the chapters, there are times where across 2 or 3 chapters, the two of them are in a room or in a situation together, and it will actually flip between their perspectives very subtly and very cleverly as the book goes on. I really like that. The main story of the book concerns the fact that Agnes, who is looking after her aged mother and her orphaned nephew, her work is drying up because of photography. People are choosing to get their photographs taken instead of their silhouettes done. And so her art form is dying, and so she's very desperate for anyone who will come and sit and pay her to do a traditional silhouette. She also, 2 years ago, had a bout of pneumonia that almost killed her. Now she's getting in new clients quite desperately, but those clients are very quickly dying after they sit for her. And at first you think maybe she's cursed. At first you think maybe her art is the thing that's killing them. And this is implied at the beginning because she might make a mistake and cut the neck of the silhouette, and then they die with their throat slit. This is fantastic, but it's never solidified as the cause, as the root suspicion of the book. Instead, we have quite a few suspicions that are kind of spiraling together as the book goes on, and so eventually Agnes reaches out to Pearl, a spirit medium, hoping that she can connect to the ghosts of the people who have died and been murdered after they've sat for her, so that she can get answers and find out. And so Agnes starts to wonder, what is her connection to these people? Why are they dying after they're sitting for her? What is going on exactly? All the while, Pearl has her own story. Her older sister deals with the business side of things. She brings in the clients, she sets the tone and the mood of the seances, and so she handles all of the money, and she's a really aggressive young woman. The two of them originally came from London, and so her older sister Myrtle has this brilliant Cockney accent and this aggressive streak about her, very working class, very rough around the edges. She's a very likeable character, and she has the largest personality of the whole thing. Pearl herself also is albino, and so that helps add to the atmosphere of her being some strange spirit medium. People even remark on the fact that she has some sort of a glow around her. Meanwhile, their father, Pearl's father, is in a room in their house, pretty much an invalid. Pearl and Myrtle are half-sisters. They shared the same mother who died giving birth to Pearl, and Myrtle has always been a bit angry about that. But she blames Pearl's father. Her own father is dead. Pearl's father has been severely damaged by working in a matchstick factory. And I looked this up and it was all completely real. People who worked in matchstick factories in the Victorian period, in the Industrial Revolution, got something called phossy jaw, which is where the phosphorus in the match heads would pretty much rot away the bones and the flesh in their jaw. It is horrendous. I looked up pictures. I won't put them here. I'll spare you that. You can Google it if you want. So Pearl's dad and Myrtle's stepdad has phossy jaw, and he just kind of sits in a room unable to speak or do anything. It's really sad. And Pearl is doing these seances, and as far as you know, they're real. She is genuinely speaking to the dead. She is genuinely communing with ghosts. And so the book is pretty scary. There are ghosts, there are hauntings, there are spirits that speak or appear as shadows on the wall. You know, the candles flicker. It's all very atmospheric. And Laura Purcell, through especially The Silent Companions and Bone China, has proven that she can create ghostly atmosphere and hauntings. But in her books, especially in The Corset and in Shape of Darkness, you're always doubtful as to whether the ghosts are real, whether someone is playing a trick, something is misunderstood, there's something else going on, kind of a Scooby-Doo situation. And that carries on until the very end. In fact, there is a quote on the back from Sonia Velton, who said that she was guessing until the very last page. And I thought, very last page? That's a bit dramatic. I'm sure it's not the very last. It is. It's the very last page. The last 50 pages of this book, no spoilers, the last 50 pages are constant revelations. Like, it's insane how many twists and turns this book takes. And there are things that I'm missing out because I've seen so much and I've now understood so much. So much has come to light that it's hard to remember how it was before, what the status quo was at the beginning of the book. But Agnes and Pearl are very richly detailed characters. This is the big strength of The Corset and The Shape of Darkness. These two books both have two main characters, and those two main characters are fantastically well realized. And the relationship between them builds as the book goes on. So Agnes and Pearl increasingly spend more time together. Agnes wants to commune with the dead, and Pearl actually, through making seances, has her own wish to reach out to her mother, who she never knew because she died in childbirth. And Pearl is desperate to reach out to her mother. She does these seances. Her older sister has decided this is their job, this is what they do, this is how they make money. And Pearl, all the while, wants to heal her father, who has phossy jaw, and wants to commune with the ghost of her mother. And she's getting in practice because she's communing with these She's communing with these ghosts and it feels like it's working. And so hopefully she can commune with her mum eventually. So that's the setup. I can't really tell you anything more without spoiling it, and I've gone on for a while. But this book is absolutely wonderful. I think Laura Purcell has reached a point now with her writing where she's able to blend everything that you've seen in her previous three books all together. You've got the hauntings, you've got the dripping atmosphere, this black, bleak, dark, gothic, secluded, cramped and claustrophobic atmosphere, which we've seen in things like The Silent Companions, and then you've got this very, very clever murder mystery setup, which was explored wonderfully in The Corset. But this is more than that. This is a book with so many twists and turns, and it all begins with the question, is Agnes responsible for the deaths of these people? They're clearly being murdered out on the street, but are they being murdered through some supernatural element? Is it a ghost that's killing them? Are they being killed by someone who wants to get to her? Someone who is traumatizing and emotionally torturing Agnes in some way? Are these people all trying to get to her in some way, to twist her mind, to make her afraid? All the while, Agnes is very vulnerable. She had a sister, and her sister was an evil, horrible, monstrous woman that we find out more and more about as the book goes on, without ever having any direct contact with her because she's dead. And that sister was married to a doctor, Simon. Simon is a very, very alive and important character in this story. He is a friend of Agnes's and he has supported her for so many years. The two of them are inseparable, and you can tell there's some potential romance there. Agnes also had a lover who was a Navy man who died, and she is constantly wishing that she could reach out to him. So there's a lot of death in this. There is a lot of communing with the dead. There are constant relationships going on between the living and the dead. And the dead sometimes seem to be speaking back, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they exist only in memories, and perspectives on those dead people and how they are remembered by different people also plays a little bit of a part. It's kind of got a Kazuo Ishiguro, who do you believe, who's telling the truth, unreliable narrator kind of thing going on at times. That isn't fully explored, but it's explored just enough to give dimension and weight and atmosphere to this book. It is a wonderful gothic horror historical fiction masterpiece. I am so happy to have read this book, and I could go on and on about it for ages. The art that Agnes does is so exciting and rich, and it adds something to the atmosphere. It's such a perfect job for someone like her, a protagonist like her, to have. And then you've got the spirit medium and the question of whether these spirits are real and the job is real and what these people are after. And you do kind of suspect everyone. You know, what is Simon the Doctor's involvement in this? Does Myrtle want something? Is she telling the truth? Is she manipulating her sister, or does her sister really have a gift? And what's going to happen with their dad and his Fossey jaw? Why is he consistently being brought up through the book? Something has to happen to him, with him, by him. So many questions, so many threads, so many revelations. Not a single stone is left unturned. And you will have ideas as you read this about what it might really be about, what's really going on. And some of your ideas might be right. Some of the things you guess might be true, and some of them won't be. And it's really exciting to constantly be wondering and thinking, what's happening here? I can't wait to find out. And it just draws you in constantly. It's a perfectly paced book. Every single chapter is exciting. Nothing is wasted. It's 400 pages, the last 50 of which are constant revelation after revelation, and it's flawless plotting and pacing. I cannot think of a negative thing to say about this book. I can't think of a negative thing when it comes to any of Laura Purcell's books. She's one of my favourite authors. They are perfect gothic horror, they are perfect mysteries, they are perfect historical fiction, they are flawless books. You might not like the genre, you might not like historical fiction, you might not enjoy supernatural gothic horror stuff, but you cannot fault her writing. You cannot fault her plotting and her characterization. Everything works in tandem. It's a perfect machine. Every one of her books is a perfect machine where every cog works with every other cog. There isn't a loose thread anywhere. There is not a weak part when it comes to the writing, the setting, the atmosphere, the characters, the drama, the revelations, where the story goes. I cannot praise Laura Purcell enough. She is absolutely one of my favourite writers, and I think that this is now her best book. Laura Purcell herself has said before this book came out, I saw on Twitter, she mentioned that The Corset is her favourite book of hers. Now, I don't know if this is now her favourite book of hers, but it's definitely mine. The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell is an astonishing read, and I beg every fan of gothic fiction, horror fiction, historical fiction, British fiction, fiction by women to check it out. She's incredible. This is incredible. My new favourite Laura Purcell novel. All right, that'll do. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for books.